Hi everyone, welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today's topic is iconic dishes.
Iconic dishes, yeah. I mean, like what do you think makes an iconic dish? Like that kind of transcends time and space.
I guess it's a dish that people talk about and that are representative about a chef and his identity. For instance, Sex on the Beach. You know that dish?
Yeah, unfortunately I know that dish.
This dish is the most bizarre dish I've ever seen. It's called Sex on the Beach, and it's a dessert. And what you get is like something that looks like sand, and then you have like this used condom that it's edible that has milk inside, or like a creamy thing. And the way to eat it is that you have to lift the condom and open your mouth and put it into your mouth. And this is a dessert. It has a creamy thing and strawberries and this and that. But I think it's pretty crazy that like it's almost humiliating for the guest to make them do that, to enjoy the dessert. But at the end of the day, something really punk, I would say, and memorable, maybe in a bad way, and it's a dish that people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and then I think it's made him famous now. Whether you like it or not, it has shock value. Okay, all right, so I would say iconic dish, one of the most iconic dishes is the gargouilles from Michel Bras.
Oh, amazing dish, yeah.
Gargouilles is a riff on a traditional stew from the Aubrac region that Michel Bras reinterpreted. And it's basically a dish consisting of, like 30 plus different vegetables and herbs and flowers that are cooked in a certain sequence so that they have different textures depending on the vegetables in mineral water with a bit of ham, and are then plated like a very, very elaborate salad of different textures. It also has a couple of sort of sauces on the plate. The dish is constantly changing, constantly evolving. But this is one of the most replicated dishes in the culinary world, without a doubt. I think almost even like the very well-known Michelin star chefs today, most of them have a dish that's sort of an homage to this gargouille.
Yeah, you will see this dish if you Google Michel Bras. It's usually the cover of his book of the same name. And when I was working in Mugaritz, we had one of these variations of that dish, and I was working in the station that was producing the dish. So I would have to go to the garden and pick up, it was over 30 different herbs, just a leaf of every herb, and every leaf had to have its own specific size. For instance, you wouldn't have a very large leaf of sage because it's very powerful, just a very little one. But for instance, basil or coriander, you could have a bigger one because you can eat this like a salad. So we would know how many bookings we had every day. So if we had like, let's say 30 bookings, I had to pick, let's say 35 leaves of each single. It was like over 30 herbs and about 12 flowers, like flower petals. And this was served just with an Emmental cheese water, which was made by mixing Emmental cheese and mineral water on the Thermomix and then just strain it. And on top there was just a beurre noisette, and that was the dish. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So my next one would be Robuchon's potato puree, mashed potatoes. You know that dish?
Of course, everybody knows it. I think it's the benchmark of any potato puree around the world. It's what is always referenced. And I mean, it's also a sort of representation of that sort of, French cooking that, dictates so much of the cooking that's going on in the world.
To make this puree, you pass the potato first with a thicker kind of a strain and then a finer one. And then you emulsify it with lots of butter. And that's what's make this so nice. And so it has this texture that it almost falls from the spoon. Yeah. Really nice puree.
I heard him say once, you need really good potatoes. You need to boil them with the skin on, not skin, like you don't peel them before you boil them. That's very important. And I think he said it's 2 parts potato, 1 part butter.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of butter, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost yellow at the end.
Yeah. All right. For me, one of the really good signature dish, iconic dish is Martin Berasategi's foie gras with green apple and eel.
That's a classic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a classic. It's also also been replicated quite a lot. And it's just such a, like back when because it's been on his menu for a long time.
Yeah.
But it was a very modern sort of interpretation and a mix of ingredients, It had a little bit of a Japanese influence, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And, the fattiness from the foie and the yield, the texture, together with the green apple, I feel like kind of is a symbol of that sort of like new wave of cooking, kind of like a little bit more fresh, a little bit more vibrant, more modern, that kind of emerged together with Berasategui, especially in Spain.
I would say next, Fergus Henderson's bone marrow dish.
I mean, that's an all-time classic.
And it's so simple. Just cook bone marrows that you spread on a good loaf of toasted bread, and it comes with a parsley lemon salad, and that's it.
Yeah, with capers in the salad. Yeah, it's just like a small salad, just kind of like parsley that you lightly chop. I mean, I think Fergus says he doesn't say you should chop the parsley. He says you should discipline it a little bit, which just means kind of running your knife through it a little bit. Fergus is such a poetic guy.
Yeah, you want the leaves of the parsley to be there, but of course not like a complete one. Yeah.
And I mean, why is it an iconic dish? I mean, first of all, it's delicious. I ate it many, many times actually at St. John. And it's so simple, but I mean, again, it kind of encompasses a movement that Fergus Henderson started, this whole nose to tail cooking, and it really is the sort of like flag for this movement that he did.
I remember once Anthony Bourdain wrote that if you would see this dish on a menu, you would know that that chef was a good fella. He was one of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's true. And it's kind of like that in London also, like people who work for St. John, they're like a clique. They're like a family. Okay, I mean, one of the most old school signature dishes is the truffle soup by Bocuse, which, it's like, it really is like, it just encompasses like Bocuse cooking, I mean, Bocuse is very old school, and the dish, it was pretty full on. It had like whole truffles in the soup, like cooked in the soup. It comes in this like classic white porcelain dish with a puff pastry lid, and it's just everything from like a bygone era, that sort of like turning point of sort of like, the Bocuse era of cooking to sort of like nouvelle cuisine to like a fresher sort of less heavy style of cooking. But I think the fact that like, this is pretty badass putting whole truffles in your soup.
So my next dish is old mole from Enrique Olvera. And I really like this dish because it's so minimalistic and it tells a story, because you have like, it's just like one dot inside of a bigger dot. The dot on the center is the young mole, and around it is the old mole. So it's you're basically doing like this principle of mixing an old sauce with a new sauce, which is the same you see with mother sauces or mother doughs or sourdoughs or these kind of things, but made with mole, and that's a dish. You get it just like that. I didn't have this mole, but I went to Cosme, which is one of Olvera's restaurant run by Daniela Soto Inés in New York, and I had the mole they made there with burrata cheese with wood, which was an amazing combination, man.
Yeah, I actually had the dish in the original Pujol before they moved, and it's like you say, it's such a cool dish because it's so minimalistic. The mole itself, I mean, both moles are super delicious. You just get a couple of tortillas on the side and you just like scoop it up and eat it. And I think this dish is pretty cool because it makes you understand a very sort of complex cultural aspect of Mexican cooking, because people, like if you get a stew, like if you get chicken in mole, you'll eat it and you think, oh, this is delicious, but you won't necessarily think about that sauce and all that goes in it and the cultural background of it, and the complexity of it also, that it's, so and so many days old and that keeps evolving and evolving and evolving. And I think that's really why this dish is so cool, because it teaches you something about what you're eating and where you are.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think that's one of the most difficult things to do, to tell a story through a dish.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so my next one are the Idiazaba gnocchi from Mugaritz. quite a while ago now that they had this dish on. But for me, it's like quintessential Bugarets dish, you know? It's like a mix again of sort of like sense of place and technique. I mean, for people who don't know, these are fake gnocchi that are made from Idiazabal. The Idiazabal cheese is a very traditional cheese in the Basque region, and you basically make a water from this cheese and you mix it with kuzu, which is a Japanese starch from mountain tubers, and basically while you then pipe it into a liquid and it jellifies into the liquid while you kind of cut off these gnocchi. So what happens is that you have these potato gnocchi that when you eat them, just like they're completely creamy in your mouth. I think it gets served like it used to get served with just like a very light ham stock, like a very clear ham stock, if I'm not mistaken, and a couple of herbs on top. That's it. And it's this mix of like ingredient-driven cooking and like super forward-thinking technique that really embodies the like Bugaret spirit, in my opinion.
My next dish would be pineapple and ants from Alex Atala.
Yeah.
And again, this is just a 2-ingredient dish, and it's amazing. It's just a dice of pineapple, and on top is just a piece of ant that tastes like lemon. We have similar ants in Venezuela. We call it lemon ants. And yeah, and that's it. I think this dish also tells a story. You see this and you probably think that these are 2 ingredients that come from America. You think about Amazonian cuisine. I mean, it evokes many things just by seeing it before you taste it.
Yeah, definitely. And then again, it's like when he put it on, you know, like entomophagy and eating insects wasn't like so much of a big thing. I mean, it still isn't. But again, it's kind of like, especially for, you know, you're in Latin America and then you have guests that come to your restaurant that are like a little bit more, they're like a little bit more used to safe things. And then you really get sort of like pulled out of this like safe, like fine dining environment, get really put into a place where it's sort of like, yeah, this is here. You know, like this is here, this is the Amazon, you know, like people eat insects, right? But that's really cool. That was really brave.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Okay, so my next dish is the Salmonette de Gaudi from very early days of El Bulli, which, you know, is the cover picture of the Mediterranean cookbook from Ferran Adrià, and is, I think, you know, one of the most iconic dishes from early days of El Bulli. I think like before they really took off, it was like the most iconic dish that they did.
Probably, yeah.
And I mean, it's actually a very simple dish. It's a red mullet fillet that gets cooked with a crust of very finely diced mixed vegetables like peppers, mixed peppers mainly. What else is in there?
I think peppers, zucchini, like the typical dishes you get in Catalan cuisine.
Yeah.
And they resemble these mosaics you see in Barcelona from Antoni Gaudí. And yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. This also tells a story.
Yeah, and it was so forward-thinking because actually it's quite a traditional sort of like flavor combination and dish. I mean, it's a piece of fish with vegetables on top, but what made it so interesting was the beginning of the approach that they took to using new techniques in that kitchen. The fact that they achieved this like really even, thin crust of vegetables is because they stuck the vegetables to the fish using a gelatin that activates. Normally, gelatin activates when it cools down, when it gets dissolved hot, and then cools down and it jellifies. But this gelatin is the opposite. You mix it cold, and then when it heats up, it binds. So they would brush the fish with this gelatin, add the vegetables on top very, very neatly, and then carefully place the fish skin side down. And as the fish was cooking, this gelatin would stick the vegetables to the fish, which, I mean, was completely unheard of at that time, you know? And I mean, for me, still today is an amazing technique.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.